Hello, Taurus. Welcome back. Today's reading is about uncovering the truth behind their feelings. And this might be somebody that's been on your mind recently. Whether things have been steady, uncertain, or somewhere in between, this is where we're going to explore what's really going on in their heart. So let's see what's coming through. There was a calmness to the way this connection began, or at least a grounded energy beneath it. From the very start, one or both of you approached this with care and with intention. This wasn't a whirlwind romance built on chaos or impulsive decisions. It was slow-burning, cautious, and in many ways deliberate. There was a real desire to build something that could last, even if neither of you knew what it would actually look like in the long run. There may have been conversations about taking it slow, or maybe it just naturally unfolded at a slower pace. But that wasn't a bad thing. In fact, it made things feel more stable, more secure, at least on the surface. Emotionally, there was a sense of quiet satisfaction in those early stages. This didn't feel like a connection born out of desperation. It felt mutual. There was an appreciation for each other, a sense that both of you were getting something emotionally fulfilling from this. In a lot of ways, it probably felt emotionally safe, which is something many people crave but rarely find. You might have felt seen in a way you hadn't been in past connections, like this person recognized something in you, not just your appearance or your presence, but your actual emotional depth. And while there was forward movement here, it wasn't rushed. This connection likely had a steady rhythm to it, with moments that felt genuinely rewarding, dates that lingered, conversations that felt easy, and moments where you felt like you could breathe around them. Even if things weren't perfect, there was an undercurrent of emotional contentment. It's possible you both felt, at least at some point, that this was going somewhere, not necessarily headed straight for label or commitment, but that something real was forming. But beneath that emotional ease, there was something being avoided, some kind of truth, realization, or emotional reckoning that never quite came to the surface. One of you may have been unwilling or simply not ready to fully look at what was really happening. Maybe the connection brought up questions neither of you wanted to answer. What are we doing here? Are we actually emotionally available? Are we aligned in what we want long term? These questions may have existed in the background, but there wasn't a shared space to explore them. They just sat there, unspoken. There's a sense of missed opportunity in this energy, not because things went horribly wrong, but because something never fully clicked into place. One or both of you may have chosen to stay in the comfort of that emotional high rather than confront deeper emotional truth that was waiting beneath it. There could have been avoidance around accountability or fear of disrupting the good thing that was happening. So rather than shaking the foundation, you or them may have chosen to stay emotionally neutral on the surface. What's complicated about this kind of dynamic is that it can feel fine even when something is quietly unraveling. It's not dramatic, there's no obvious betrayal or blow-ups, but there's this slow drift that starts to happen when important emotional truths are left unspoken. And in this case, that drift likely began the moment one of you started to feel more than you were willing to admit, when emotional safety turned into emotional inertia, where neither person wanted to break the peace by naming what was truly going on beneath it all. There's a heaviness in the past energy, but not the kind that comes from conflict. It's the heaviness of potential that never fully got to express itself. There may have been moments when you felt an intuitive nudge. Something isn't quite right, or maybe something's being avoided, but it was easier to focus on what was working than what wasn't. For some of you, there was a moment where something could have shifted, maybe even a turning point where real honesty could have changed everything. But someone backed out. Maybe they didn't want to deal with what it would bring up, or they didn't feel ready. So the moment passed, and the connection stayed in a kind of emotional limbo. What's also coming through is a subtle imbalance in effort. While it might have looked mutual, one of you may have been putting in just a little more, whether emotionally, practically, or in terms of communication. It wasn't enough to scream unbalanced, but over time that quiet effort builds up. It becomes emotional weight, and eventually, it starts to affect how seen and valued you feel in the connection. There's also the possibility that this person saw you as someone who had it all together, emotionally, practically, or even spiritually, and rather than rising to meet you there, they stayed in their comfort zone. It's not that they didn't care, it's that they didn't want to confront what being with you would require of them. That kind of mirror can be intimidating, especially to someone who isn't used to emotional depth. In the end, the past between you two is a mix of genuine connection, emotional satisfaction, and unspoken truth. Something real was there, but it was handled with too much emotional caution and not enough clarity. And now, that lack of confrontation in the past may be shaping how this energy is still showing up today. Right now, this connection is sitting in a complicated space. On the surface, it may look like things are calm, or even like nothing is happening at all, but under the surface, there's a lot of emotional structure being considered. One or both of you is thinking long term. There's contemplation around values, tradition, and what it actually means to commit to something or someone. This isn't casual energy, it's thoughtful, heavy, and even a little spiritual in its undertone. There's a sense that both of you are reflecting on what love really means in a lasting sense. Not just the chemistry or connection, but the responsibility that comes with being emotionally present and consistent in someone's life. Whether you're in communication or not, there's this shared awareness that if this connection continues, it can't be handled lightly. It needs a solid foundation, it needs emotional maturity, and it needs alignment in values, not just desire. For some of you, this could be a period where you're both reflecting separately but in parallel. Maybe you're both being drawn inward, doing your own version of emotional inventory. What do you really want in a partner? What patterns are you done repeating? There's a spiritual undertone here, like this connection is triggering deeper questions around purpose, timing, and what real partnership is meant to look like. Even if those questions aren't being shared out loud, they're being felt. The energy is surprisingly cooperative right now, though. There's a willingness, consciously or not, to work through what went unspoken before. It may not look like big emotional conversations, but there's a sense of emotional alignment beginning to take root, like you're both starting to understand each other more clearly, even without words. There's potential for collaboration, for building something again, but this time with more awareness, less fantasy, and more realism. But even with that shared desire to grow or work through things, there's still a gap in what's being built versus what's being felt. One or both of you may be thinking about commitment, partnership, even the future, but the structure to support that still isn't fully in place. It's like the idea of long-term happiness is there, but the foundation is cracked or unfinished. There's a missing piece that neither of you has quite figured out how to restore. This is also a moment where one or both of you might be reflecting on how much effort went into maintaining the connection and what that effort produced. There may be a feeling of, we tried, but do we actually grow together? The emotional intention was there, the care was real, but there's a question of whether the emotional effort matched the emotional outcome. It's also possible that external factors may have been interfering. Maybe family expectations, living situations, or a sense of timing that doesn't seem to sync up. There's something about the stability of this connection that feels fragile right now, like both of you want it to work, or at least to be acknowledged, but you're not sure if the foundation can be trusted anymore. You might be wondering if this connection could actually support a real, lasting future, or if it's better left as something you both learned from. This energy may also be highlighting a misalignment in goals or priorities. You might want something concrete, commitment, partnership, or even clarity, while they're still trying to figure out where they fit in emotionally. Or perhaps they are the one who wants to solidify things now, but you've already started emotionally detaching because of how shaky things have felt. Either way, there's a slight mismatch, not necessarily in feelings, but in timing and vision. Emotionally, this feels like a pause for perspective moment. A moment when you're both reevaluating not just the connection, but yourselves, who you are within relationships and what you're willing to build, and also what kind of love you're ready to receive. That kind of inner work doesn't always look dramatic. It often shows up as silence, distance, or at a slower pace. But behind that stillness, there's deep emotional reflection happening. For some, there may be an ongoing energetic tether between you, like you're still thinking of each other, still feeling their emotional presence, even if there's no contact. This isn't just nostalgia, it's a spiritual nudge. There's a reason that this person is still in your emotional field, and it's not because the universe wants you stuck, it's because something here is being integrated, either for healing or preparation. At its core, this present energy asks, can we rebuild this, truthfully, consciously, and with mutual effort? That's the unspoken question hovering between you. And whether the answer is yes or no, what's being revealed now is essential to your own growth. Even if the relationship doesn't fully reignite, the clarity that's rising through this pause is preparing you for the kind of connection that truly aligns. This isn't about rekindling what was. It's about asking yourself if what you once had can evolve into something better, or if it's served its purpose already. Either way, this is a turning point, and it's one that requires honesty, not just with each other, but with yourselves. In the coming weeks, the energy between you and this person shifts into something lighter, but not necessarily easier. What's surfacing now is curiosity, vulnerability, and an emotional impulse to reconnect, though it's likely to emerge in indirect or awkward ways. This doesn't look like bold, confident action. It looks like someone dipping their toe into the water, emotionally speaking, trying to figure out if the connection is still alive. There's emotional vulnerability rising to the surface, even if it's subtle. It could come through a small message, a playful interaction, or a sudden memory that triggers a need to reach out. This feels like someone who has been holding back for a long time and finally allows themselves a moment of softness, an I miss you message that never gets spoken, but leaks out in a slightly too late meme or strangely timed text. The sentiment behind it is genuine, but it's filtered through emotional caution. There's also a childlike energy to this future period, not in an immature way, but in a tentative, hopeful kind of way. It's like you're both peeking around the corner emotionally, wondering if it's safe to show your cards, or whether the game has already ended. The desire to connect is mutual, but the emotional vocabulary may still be limited. There's a lot of feeling out energy here, like emotional training wheels after a long period of silence or confusion. With all this emotional opening, however, comes a strong intellectual thread as well. This person might still be watching you from a distance, through social media, mutuals, or even just energetically turning into your presence without direct communication. They're trying to make sense of how you're feeling, what you want, and whether the door is still open. It's not stalking, it's curiosity mixed with caution. They don't want to make a fool of themselves. They don't want to feel vulnerable if it's not safe. So instead, they observe, they gather data, and they try to figure you out before making a move. And yet, the connection that they feel to you isn't something that they can entirely intellectualize. The emotional pull is stronger than they expected, even now. That's what makes this energy so unpredictable. One moment, they're convinced they should reach out, saying something, or try again. The next, they're convinced that it's too late or you've already moved on. It's a mental tug-of-war, and you might feel it in waves, those moments where their energy suddenly hits you out of nowhere and then disappears again. But here's where things get complicated. Even if they want to connect, even if they do, there's still something not fully aligned. The emotional and mental energy is active, but the grounded, practical energy, that's where things fall short. There's a lack of follow-through in the energy. It's like someone who wants to start over, but hasn't thought about what would it actually look like. The intent is there, the readiness is not. There may also be a tendency for this person to treat the reconnection too casually, almost as a way of avoiding deeper responsibility. They may reach out, act sweet or playful, but then not know how to maintain that momentum. This can create a frustrating push and pull dynamic, because you'll sense the sincerity of their reach, but also the inconsistency in their ability to sustain it. That's the core challenge of this next phase, good intentions without a solid plan. One or both of you may realize that while the feelings are still real, the structure to build something meaningful just isn't present yet. This could be especially frustrating if you've already done the emotional work and you're looking for something grounded and reciprocal, not just emotionally available, but emotionally dependable. This doesn't mean the connection is doomed, far from it, but it does mean that any progress over the next 30 days will likely be more emotional and mental than practical. The heart is opening, communication may start, but the stability, that is still in question. One person may be ready to take things seriously, while the other is still playing emotional catch-up. Still, there's something valuable in this phase. Even a small step forward, even an awkward conversation, even a simple, "Hey, I was thinking of you," can break the energetic standstill, and sometimes that's enough to shift the direction of a connection entirely. The emotional sincerity in this energy is real. It's just young, unrefined, and a little unsure of itself. This next month may not bring the final answer, but it will bring a sense of clarity about where you both stand emotionally. Whether this is a soft reconnection, a brief exchange, or a deeper realization on your end, something will click into place. And even if it doesn't lead straight to reunion or resolution, it will bring you closer to understanding whether this connection still has room to grow or whether it's served its purpose for now. The most important thing to remember is in this stage is to stay emotionally grounded. Let their actions match their energy before you invest fully. Be open but not overexposed. There's sweetness here, but sweetness alone isn't enough. Let them show you whether they're capable of building something lasting, not just offering pieces of potential. Emotionally, they're still holding space for you, whether they admit it or not. There's a quiet intensity in how they feel right now, and it might even be confusing to them. On one hand, the feelings are present, possibly even stronger than they were when you last spoke or connected. On the other hand, they don't entirely know what to do with those feelings. This isn't someone who's moved on. They haven't emotionally closed that chapter. In fact, a part of them still sees this connection as something sacred. There's something pure and open in their hearts when they think about you. They associate you with emotional safety, with softness, and with a kind of affection that's hard to find in others. There's a longing here, not for the drama or for the past exactly, but for the emotional tone that you brought into their life. You may have shown them a different way of loving, a more present, emotionally aware way. And now that there's space between you, they feel the absence of that in a very real way. But their heart is tangled. They have feelings, but they're also confused by them. They may not fully trust what they're feeling, or they don't know whether it's safe to act on those emotions. There's fear here, but it's not just fear of rejection. It's fear of what will happen if they open up and it doesn't work. They're afraid that if they give into those emotions fully, they'll lose control. And control is something they've likely used to protect themselves, especially when relationships start feeling too vulnerable. There's been some internal clarity, though. The fog is lifting in subtle ways. They're beginning to see the patterns, maybe how they self-sabotaged or how they avoided emotional truths in the past. For some of them, this is the first time they've really sat with the reality of how they felt about you and how deeply it still affects them. But even as these emotional realizations begin to rise, there's still hesitation. Because knowing how you feel is one thing, doing something with that knowledge is another. This is someone who finally is starting to get honest with themselves, but they're not ready to be fully honest with you yet. They may not know how to express what's in their heart without unraveling. They might still be afraid that you'll see them as too late, too inconsistent, or too confusing. That fear keeps them quiet. They want to speak, to share, and even to explain, but when the moment comes, they freeze up, they second guess, and they hold back. Right now, their emotional energy is a bit bottled up. It's flowing internally, but not outwardly. That's what creates this sense of tension. They're still feeling so much, but expressing so little. You might pick up on it through dreams, sudden emotional waves, or just that gut feeling that something's still alive between you. That feeling is real. They haven't let go emotionally, even if their actions have been inconsistent or absent. There's also a sense of emotional regret here, not necessarily over a single moment, but over how they handled their heart. They might be realizing that they missed the chance to be emotionally present when it mattered most. And now they're finally beginning to feel more clearly. They don't know how to reverse what's already happened. That kind of emotional awareness brings sadness, but also growth. Still, no matter how much they feel or how much they now understand, there's a clear emotional block. Their heart wants connection, their mind wants safety, and in that tug of war, the heart is losing for now. They may spend the next few weeks reflecting more than reaching out, reviewing old memories, or even rehearsing conversations in their head. There's a desire to reconnect, but it's stuck in emotional traffic. What's most important to know is that their feelings are not gone. They're real, they're deep, and they're sitting quietly behind a wall of emotional hesitation. This is someone who may cry alone over this, who may feel overwhelmed by the intensity of what they feel and still be unable to act on it. They don't lack feeling, they lack readiness. That said, this pause has a purpose. Their emotional energy is evolving. Even if they don't act like it now, they're getting closer to clarity. and that clarity will eventually demand action. Whether it's reaching out to you or finally accepting that silence won't resolve what's in their heart. For now, they're not numb, they're navigating. Slowly, uncertainty, but genuinely. If you're still feeling their energy, it's because your own emotional presence hasn't faded for them. They may not be showing up with words, but in their own internal world, you're still a central part of the story they're trying to make sense of. Right now, their next move isn't about bold steps or emotional declarations, it's about survival. They're emotionally raw, exhausted, and hyper-aware of how unstable things feel between you two. While a part of them may crave reconnection, they're still guarded, bracing for impact, and not convinced that reaching out will end in anything other than emotional exposure or disappointment. This isn't someone who's sitting comfortably in silence, they're sitting in uncertainty, and it's weighing on them. They're thinking about the future, but not the way that they used to. The fantasy of building something long-term with you, that idea of emotional or domestic partnership, that steady life, has been shaken. Not because they don't still think about it, but because they're realizing how far they may have drifted from actually being able to make that dream real. That kind of stability feels out of reach to them right now, and the shame or frustration tied to that is making it harder for them to act at all. Their mind is looping around questions like, could we really build something solid? Am I capable of giving them what they need? What if I show up and it still doesn't work? These questions aren't hypothetical, they're fear-based and rooted in past patterns and failures. They see the cracks in what you had together, and while part of them wants to repair it, the other part is already emotionally defeated, assuming that what's broken can't be fixed. Emotionally, they're still very much on the defensive. The image that keeps coming up is someone leaning against a door that they want to open, but too afraid of what's waiting on the other side. There's a paranoia here, not necessarily about you, but about being hurt again, about trying and failing, about vulnerability leading to more confusion or loss. So instead of moving, they fortify their walls. They convince themselves that caution is protection. There's also the resistance to the past. The memories of what you two shared is still very present for them, but they're not looking at them through rose-colored glasses anymore. In fact, they might be actively trying to detach from those memories, not because they don't value them, but because remembering what it once was painful. It reminds them of what they lost or what they mishandled. That emotional nostalgia is a double-edged sword, comforting but also hard to live with. And in that tension, they freeze. They might think about messaging you, several times even, but they hold back. They question their timing, their tone, and their motives. They're afraid of reopening wounds, both yours and their own, so they stay stuck in this internal loop, reliving the connection in their mind, but not finding the courage to act on it. The likelihood of them reaching out in the next few weeks is low, not because the feelings are gone, but because the fear is getting stronger. Their energy is still very much focused on defense, not engagement. They don't feel emotionally equipped to face the past with clarity or the future with confidence. And until that changes, their actions will reflect hesitation more than hope. That said, they're not indifferent. This isn't apathy, it's paralysis. Their silence isn't a lack of care, it's an overflow of emotions that they haven't sorted through. And because they're not ready to face the full emotional truth of the connection, they retreat into emotional self-protection. For now, that means no forward motion. The bigger question here isn't what they'll do, it's what are they capable of doing. Right now, they're stuck between the emotional weight of the past and the overwhelming pressure of the future. Their next step, if any, would likely be small, if not entirely internal. It could be a shift in perspective, a realization, a moment of clarity, but outwardly, they're not ready for deep engagement yet. For you, this might be a time to turn inward as well. You've done the waiting, the wondering, and the emotional processing. Now it may be time to focus on what you need outside of their story. If they eventually find the strength to act, they'll have to meet you where you are, not where they left you. The connection still exists, but for now, their actions, or lack of, will come from fear, not from healing. And until that fear is faced, their energy will continue to stall, no matter how much they feel inside. So Taurus, that's what I'm seeing in your connection right now. There's still a lot going on beneath the surface, emotionally, energetically, and spiritually. Even if you're not hearing or seeing anything directly from this person, their feelings are real, but so are their fears. And until they face those fears, the silence may continue. In the meantime, focus on your own clarity, your own stability, and let their energy meet you where you are, if and when it's truly ready. If this reading resonated with you, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on any future readings. Drop a comment if you're open to sharing your story. I would love to hear how this landed for you. Thank you for being here, and I'll see you in the next one.